Hello, everyone. Welcome to Rash's World. Today we have a special guest, Sherianna Boyle. How are you doing today?
Great. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
All right. Yeah. So I start off with the toughest question. And so, which is, how would you briefly describe yourself? What would you say? How would you describe yourself here to our audience?
How would I describe myself?
Yes.
Probably intuitive. And I think that's one of the biggest things I would say. And look, the characteristics are you looking for? Qualities?
Anything you'd like to share?
um,
What defines you? Or
I'm
how would you define
hardworking.
yourself?
I'm
That's
definitely
good.
hardworking.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hardworking, intuitive, passionate.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah. So you are a best-selling author, international best-selling author, and today we want to talk about your most recent book, Just Ask Spirit, Free Your Emotions to Energize Intuition and Discover Purpose. And you already talked about intuitive and intuition, and that's something that's very important to me too. So what would you what's just ask spirit? What is that about?
I know, huh?
And we'll dive right into it. What would you
Just
say?
ask spirit. Imagine
Yeah,
that, right?
yeah.
That's it. Um, Yeah, so this is my 11th book, Just Ask Spirit. And gosh, I've been coaching. So I'm an emotional detox coach, and I wrote a bunch of emotional detox books before this book. And very often I would help people to process their emotions. And then after we went into processing state, they would ask questions, my clients.
Mhm,
And I would say, well, let's just ask spirit.
mhm.
That would be my response.
Yeah.
And then I would channel and tune in, and that just became a regular thing. And I said that for years. And then one day I was like, maybe I should write a book with that title. So that's how the title came to be. I've been using it in my coaching practice for a really long time and my daily life. And and the book is about learning how your emotions, as you allow yourself to experience them, enter a processing state, you're in a state where it's really primed for asking
Mhm,
because you're in a higher vibration.
mhm, mhm,
It's the ideal time to, and it's not just about wanting something. It's also about receiving, what's available for all of us to receive.
mhm. But for receiving, you need a certain openness, right? You need to be also like ready to receive because if your windows are shut and your curtains are drawn, then there is no receiving. And I like Meister Eckhart, who the mystic, who talks about you need to empty yourself to be able to receive and to fill yourself up. So, and that's something I think we often forget, or we get stuck in things, or we don't see things, or we don't think there is anything spirit or spiritual out there. And I think just looking at the word spirituality, you have the word spirit in it. Psychology,
Yeah.
you have the psyche, right? So we seem to be missing out on a lot of things too.
Yeah, I think, I just came off a Just Ask Spirit retreat. I do retreats, and a lot of people, when they arrived at the retreat, they were kind of raising their eyebrow at me, like, what's this spirit thing? And I'm thinking, well, you signed up for it. But anyway, they were skeptical, they were
Yeah.
nervous, and that's okay. I find that's part of the process, honestly, is just because it is opening yourself up to something.
Mhm.
And if you're trained in a certain way or you've had a different background, sometimes that's very uncomfortable or even a little scary, or you feel a little nervous. And so I always say, Just Ask Spirit isn't just about, what does spirit have to say, like a psychic reading.
Mhm.
It's a spiritual journey.
Mhm.
It's a journey of learning to tap into something higher, your higher consciousness, your purpose, tap into your intuition, and then allow yourself to see what happens. And then you kind of get to decide, is this something that I want to deepen, or is this something that I'm interested in? I'm not here to tell anybody what to believe. I'm just here to show you that so my motto with Just Ask Spirit is feel first, then
Mhm.
ask. And people tend to ask, or they just don't ask. And that's a state of non-feeling. That's a product of non-feeling. When you're not feeling, you won't ask. Have you ever noticed that just in
Yeah.
life?
Yeah. Yeah.
That if you're, if you,
It's
yeah,
also like takes away like curiosity and so on, because that is really connected with wanting to know more, a feeling where you're like curious about things. But it's like I consider it to a zombie state where you just like, you know, you're just getting by and you're in your comfort zone and days go by and you do your work, but kind of like mindlessly. And that's why I think and we're afraid of emotions, I think, more often than not. But they make our life so colorful and so rich. They're so important. Not only that, but also for discovering ourselves too, and how we feel about things. I mean, that's part of the discovery. If you don't know how you feel about things, then you don't know who you are, I think.
yeah, absolutely. Feeling, you just can't leave it out of the equation of self-discovery and spirituality. And I think the thing that people realize after we went through the retreat was how little they do, how they were even allowing that option on the table.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's like you take something so huge and it's like you just put these blinders on,
Mhm. Yes,
and
that's
all you see is these obstacles, and you see maybe one, two, three options in your life.
mhm.
And then if you don't like any of the options, then where does that leave you? Right. And so the less we feel, the smaller our life gets in
Yeah.
terms of the what we see is available to us and what we're willing to open to and try.
Mhm. I like how we say feel first, because we're often like with feelings, we're trying to like suppress it, we're trying to control it, we're trying to block it, and so on. And all that does is just like creates more and more tension instead of actually just letting it flow out and not immediately judging them too. I mean, that's the thing. We're afraid of certain things, and some dark stuff will come up, but that's part of the cleansing, right? I like
Yes.
emotional detox. Like it
Yeah.
needs to come out, and if it doesn't come out, it's going to fester there and turn into something worse.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because so what I've known for is in the last 7 books I've written, I've created a system called Cleanse. So I
Mhm.
wrote it in my first 3 emotional detox books. It's a structure, it's an acronym for the steps of an emotional detox. And then what started to happen is I started to realize as people were processing their emotions, they were getting more intuitive. And
Mhm.
now we're in a coaching session, we're having a different conversation. I'm teaching them about intuition. I'm supporting them on a whole nother journey. So we went from, please help me learn how to feel, to, oh my gosh, like I'm getting these guidance and what does this mean? And can you help me? And so just as spirit still has cleanse, I want everyone to know that. I didn't leave it out. It's just a new variation of cleanse. It's sort of like a spiritual version, a daily practice where we learn how to feel first, and then you ask spirit. And I do it every single morning. I go through the 7 steps. I go into a state of feeling. Sometimes I ask spirit for a loved one, or I ask for healing. It doesn't have to be like something material, or I ask for guidance. Sometimes I just say, can you just show me what to focus on today? Like maybe I have a million things, but
Mhm.
what happens when you connect to spirit, and I talk about this in the book, is everything that is irrelevant dissipates.
Yeah.
And what's meaningful comes to the surface. And that's the thing I love about the practice the most, is we can get so caught up in what the things that really don't matter,
Mhm.
and they can drain the heck out of our energy. And spirit will just bring it right to the forefront for you. This is what's important. This is connected to you, your soul, your purpose. This is what you want to be focusing on.
Mhm. And I love intuition, and whenever it's like I've followed its advice, it's been the best thing ever. Even though like logically it would be the worst thing you can even imagine or think of, but being guided by that. But the problem is, like, often it's hard to discern, and often, as you're saying, is because we have all this other stuff, we don't see it clearly. It's just this tiny voice, and we're not sure. And it's not about what we want, but it's what's best for us. And sometimes it has to be that difficult step or a decision we don't want to take, but it's necessary in a certain context. And I think
Yeah.
that's, but once we can tap into that, whenever I do, it's just amazing. And it's just the best advice you could ever have.
It really is. And I hear what you're saying, because a lot of people, how many people are on the fence about their relationships? Do I stay? Do I go? I don't want to leave, but it's not good for me, or it's not working out. And or they, get themselves in situations, and that's so challenging and such an important time. How do you discern, what is spirit, what is ego, what is fear? That's the journey that you're embarking on. When you ask spirit, you're saying to yourself, I'm choosing to learn enough about myself to know when I'm being led by ego, or is this something within me? Is this my spirit? Is this my calling, my purpose? And it is a beautiful thing. You're absolutely right. When you do listen, and it's not always going to be comfortable.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes it's some things you're like, I didn't want to hear that.
Mhm.
But what I will say is, I find spirit will present it, if you ask, will present it in a way. So for example, I had someone who wanted to leave a relationship, and she kept saying the word leaving, 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 right? Letting go. And it was really the way she was looking at it. So when she went into a state of feeling, what spirit had to say was that it wasn't about leaving or letting go. It was about expanding. And that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for someone else is to let go. And then when you do, your heart expands, your energy expands. And then you see what happens. I always say that if it's meant to be, spirit will always circle it back around.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't you find
Yeah.
that, like,
Yeah.
if it's truly,
You'll miss the signals and miss the boat, but the boat will come back at some point again. You get like
it
second and third chance.
will,
Yeah.
and again until
Yeah.
you get it,
Yeah. Yeah.
because you're loved so much.
Mhm.
They won't leave you.
And I think it's also like that perspective thing, because our views are limited, and because when we think we know everything, but we don't, right? Honestly, and we get stuck in that view. It's like, oh, like you said, I only have these two options. Well, maybe there's a third option that you haven't considered, and that's when you can talk to a therapist, you can talk to a friend, you can just walk outside and just perceive the signs. They're there. They're just tiny signs that you just need to decipher, and they will tell you synchronicity, serendipity, and all that. And also the feeling of what feels right. It's not
Yeah,
necessarily what feels good, but what feels right. And I think that's, we know that deep inside. And
there's an alignment there.
it's in a lot. Yes, there's an
there
alignment.
there there's something. And I always say to my clients, I always say, does that feel aligned?
Yeah.
That is my way of asking, how does that sound to you? Does that feel aligned? And if they shake their head yes, spirit was involved.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's coming from spirit. So if something lands in that way, you'll feel aligned. You won't buck it.
Mhm. Mhm.
If it's ego, you might go into a little bit of struggle. But it's like a muscle. In the book, I talk about the 777 step pathway, and 777, the four sevens, is a high vibrational spiritual number. And it means embarking on your spiritual path. It's also a number for good luck, just so people know. And so it's been kind of interesting, because I wrote about this 777 step pathway, and I was on my way to the spiritual retreat, and I said, okay, spirit, let me know you're with me. Just show me a sign. Sure enough, I kid you not, I'm on the highway and the car comes up, four darn sevens. I'm like, come on, right? I mean,
Yeah.
this was within a half hour, and it gets right in front of me. And not only that, I decide that I'm going to get off an earlier exit to get some gas. sure enough, that car gets off the exit with me. So I'm literally following 7777 all the way off the highway. And I'm just shaking my head, going, wow, like it is so fun when you get confirmations and spirit just reassures you, you are exactly where you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be doing what you're supposed to be doing right now.
Exactly. That's the confirmation we often need, and it's there, but we have to be aware. So there's also that element of mindfulness, because if you could have not noticed, it's all around, but the number there, it's always there, but you're busy, preoccupied, you're worried about things, you don't see it, or it doesn't register. And I think there's this openness, but also a kind of mindfulness practice we need to be open to that, to be curious, to be aware. Do you agree?
I also asked. I
Hmm.
asked,
Okay, there you go. Okay, yeah, that's a good
right?
one.
I asked, and then you have to let go
Yeah.
of the answer, right? I mean, there again, this is a journey, and it's a beautiful journey because you're learning how to ask and detach
Mhm.
from the answers. You're not like, okay, what's that car? What's that car? Does that car? You know,
Yeah,
be like that. In fact, I kind of forgot about it,
yeah,
honestly.
yeah.
And and then there it was. I was like, well, isn't that magical? And it just was what I needed before I started my weekend. I was like, okay, they're with me. And this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing this right here in this moment. They
Would
bring
you
it
say?
to the moment.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Would you say it's manifestation? Is that the same thing? Are we manifesting it, or is it something different? Is it a different angle, a different perspective? What would you say?
Well, I have a different perspective on manifesting. I wrote a book on manifesting. It's called
Mhm,
Energy in Action. And my guides, so I channel all my books. And when I wrote that one before this, Just Us Spirit. And my guides told me, you got to teach them how the light is connected to the spiritual laws of the universe. So you talk about manifesting. And so I talk about the spiritual laws, what how they're connected to light, and light is overseen by spiritual masters, ascended masters, as well as archangels, and basically beings in high vibrational realms, kind of thing. So when you talk about manifesting, yeah, I mean, I think we get a little over focused on the thought thing,
mhm.
and we
Yeah,
forget that our guides are very much involved and supporting us. And it's about really raising your vibration
exactly.
and being in the light. So, yeah, I mean, if you focus on something, if that relaxes you, if that helps you to, if it's a practice that helps you to be mindful, having a vision board or something, then yeah, your vibration will probably go up. But if you're sort of ruminating or obsessing on this, I got to say this, I got to do that,
Mhm.
you might lower your vibration, get a little attached to the answers. So for me, manifesting, yeah, it is working with the higher realms and asking spirit. I don't really use my brain so much.
Mhm.
And in terms of, it's more of ask, just ask.
Mhm.
Ask for what you want. And the other thing is focus on feeling.
Mhm. Mhm.
So let's say you say I want a better job. Okay, great. Well, I want more money. Okay, great. And then what's the feeling of that? I want to feel fulfilled. I want to feel success, or I want to feel balanced, right? And that's an energy, that's a frequency. Your guides really respond to states of feeling. That's why I say feel first, then ask.
Mhm, mhm. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And so it's also interesting in terms of timing, because it seems that what my experience of manifestation was, it's not, yes, the desire is important, of course, the feeling we want something, and we have to really want it too, like deep down. But then we have to work for it, which is also another aspect. It just doesn't like come to you, that great job or the person you want to meet and so on. It's something that you have to work on as well, but then also what you're saying of raising your own frequency, your own vibration. And so it seems that once it falls in line, once it's aligned, as you say, then things will just drop to you and you will get that job or meet that person, run into that person, and so on. But not until the requirements are set in a way, right? And so it's kind of interesting in that sense. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do agree in that there's lessons and learnings
Mhm.
along the way. And I think that's what you're speaking to,
There's certain
where
conditions
you,
attached to it.
yeah,
But once you
yeah,
do, it flows really easily. But if you don't, then you're just running around in a circle and you're kind of stuck often.
it's become cyclical for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think once you get the learning, it might be just learning to speak up for yourself or articulate your needs or identify, getting more clarity. And all of that, those practices will help you. So that's part of asking spirit. It will bring you clarity once you start to receive the information, and it's different for everybody. Everybody gets information and delivered in a different way, and so it's not about learning my way or your way. It's learning what is your specific way that you're getting information from spirit. um it might be completely different from somebody else, and that's the journey of
Mhm.
getting to know yourself.
Yes, and for me, the study of psychoanalysis has been very helpful because you're looking towards the past too, which has defined you now, and there are issues that are not resolved or that are half resolved or conflicts, and once you bring them into the open and you deal with them, the path is much clearer, and you make much better decisions too in any type of job, whether it's your job or any type of life, your job, your relationships, and so on, and you gain clarity which you didn't have previously. And once the clarity is there, then again, it's easier to go ahead
Oh,
and go
it's
forward.
refreshing.
Yes.
It's refreshing. It's like taking a weight off.
Yeah,
And
I see like a backpack of like rocks and stones, and it's like, okay, now it's off. Now I can go. I'm free. I didn't know that, but now I know I am free in many
yeah.
ways. Mm.
Yeah, I think some of the greatest lessons that spirit has taught me was really identifying the difference between spirit and ego. Is ego's always limitation, finite,
Mhm.
endings, beginnings, that whole thing. And when you go into the spiritual realm, there are no limitations.
Mhm.
And so just that small adjustment, learning, oh, okay, wait a minute, this is my ego. That's
Mhm.
okay. That's
Yeah.
all right. I
Yeah,
acknowledge that.
that's important because it's often maligned and people like hate their ego. And so I was like, that's not going to help. It's got to just identify it and just let it go and move on, right? Don't try
Yeah,
to kill it as like, certain like Buddhist practices say no and embrace it, but then notice what it is, right? And I think that's
absolutely.
important.
It's just awareness, and awareness in itself is enough. And that's where the mindfulness is that you keep mentioning.
Yeah.
And that awareness is what's going to elevate your energy, and your guides love it when your awareness goes up. And that also increases the chances that you're going to start processing with
Yeah.
with more ease.
Yeah. I had one of my guests here, Sheila Winter Wallace. She talked about the spirit as well, and it's a great point. And I read in your book too, you mentioned that the spirit itself, our soul, is also it's pure, it's
Yeah.
untarnished, and so on. And then the problem arises once we are again within the body, where certain things get muddled, or we lose contact with it, or we have this negativity creep in that's blocking it like clouds. The sun is always there, but clouds are blocking it. And so that kind of like, again, detoxing, processing, freeing yourself from it is so important. And I think that is hugely necessary also in when it comes to mental health, when it comes to therapy, when it comes to wanting to improve individually as well. Like people read self-help books. Look at that, I think. And the fact that you don't believe in spirit is fine. It doesn't mean that you don't have it. I think we all do
Right.
have it, whether we believe in it or not, it's there. And just kind of open up to that, though, for your own sake, for your health, mental health, physical health, overall well being as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have to remember that emotions, I mean, I always say emotions are the gateway to the soul, and emotions are when we feel them, when
Mhm,
we process them, they awaken the senses.
mhm,
And when we awaken the senses, we awaken our higher connection and our higher support system. I think we're all working very hard
mhm.
at, in terms of as human beings. I do think there needs to be some discipline
Of course.
and some direction. But I think there's a lot of people that carry a lot of responsibility on their shoulders, taking responsibility for, well, for example, the way somebody else feels. Oh, you're upset. Oh, I'm somehow responsible for that.
Mhm.
And every time we say we're responsible, aren't we really kind of saying it's our fault?
Mhm.
And when we do that, we just smack ourselves down and we become small again, and we lose our connection to who we really are. I mean, we are spiritual beings
Mhm.
having an experience here. You know, the
I
word
agree.
spirit,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and a
Absolutely.
human body.
Yeah.
So it's really about not minimizing your truth anymore.
Mhm. And that's why for me, positivity is the only way to go. I mean, there's nothing else, you know. And I think when people get like more pessimistic about things, whether it's their own lives, the future, and what's going on, I think you need to remain positive. That's actually, I think that's your responsibility to be positive, even though it's hard. It's harder when things are not going well, but so that's the challenge there. That's the lesson.
Yeah. Yeah, as long as you're feeling and your positivity isn't a way to cover up what you're
Oh yeah,
feeling.
no, no, yeah,
I'm
yeah. So that's a
yeah,
great point you're making, right? It's
yeah,
not toxic
yeah.
positivity. I'm not talking about that. But
Yeah, yeah, in
imagining things
terms
that
of
are not real, right? That's another thing where it's like, oh,
exactly,
everything is
yeah.
fine when it's
Yeah.
not. So connecting it
Yes.
with feeling, I agree with that completely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's important it's okay to have a moment, where you might feel upset or a little sad, or just let it loose, because I think a lot of times when we're trying to hold it together,
Yeah.
so that's when maybe aspects of ourselves that we don't love start
Mhm.
to come out. Maybe we snap, or we get a little edgy, or we get a little short with someone, and that's all resistance, and
Mhm.
that's all ego. There's no spirit there. And then maybe you kind of say, oh, you realize that you're just overwhelmed,
Mhm. Mhm.
and take some pressure off yourself. So it's okay to have a moment,
Mhm.
and once you have that moment, you process what you feel, then your new fresh attitude will come into play, like what you're speaking to,
Yeah.
that you realize what's important,
Mhm.
what's meaningful. Like I said, spirit will come in, and then you get resilient.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And find it interesting too. You have detox, you have cleansing, and so on. So there's this kind of like clearing up of this negative energy that has been with us throughout our lives. And again, it's part of like emotional stress or all kinds of stress. But then it's kind of freeing yourself from it and distancing yourself in a way, but also by processing them. Because once you process them, then they're not like behind you, or they're not like following you. It's like, again, that's when you acknowledging first, and then kind of letting them go and letting them roam about, and
Mm.
not being stuck in judgments or limited of ways of thinking, I think.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ways that you know when you're connected to spirit is you move from doing to
Hmm.
being to serving.
Hmm.
And when you're in it, like a negative loop or reactivity, you're like, what do I do? How do I fix it? How do I make it go away? I don't like this. But when you start to process your emotions and connect to spirit, you learn that you're serving the planet, you're serving your family line, you're serving your community, because now you're like, wow, I'm changing myself. I feel better. I always say, like, when their energy goes up, their vibration goes up. This is what we did all weekend with the retreat. Every time somebody would process and then get some channel from spirit, get some insight, I literally would feel like I just got something.
Hmm.
And I was just witnessing. And I would say to them, thank you, thank you. I just felt blessed all of a sudden. So you really are serving when you're connected to spirit, when you're like, wow, I feel like I'm really contributing, I'm making a difference here on the planet.
It's kind of show don't tell thing we have in writing, and I think it applies to that too. One of my problems is sometimes try to tell people, it's like, well, you should do this and so on, but it comes off as a bit forced, and if they're in that negative loop, they will not listen to you, or they would think you're trying to control them, or they would have these negative thoughts projected onto you. But then what you can do is exactly that. just kind of raise your own level, and then they come to you. It's like, well, what's your secret? Like, yeah, and sometimes it does rub off. You walk into a room where you're smiling, you're happy, and suddenly the gloom kind of evaporates, and people are doing the same thing. The opposite exists as well, right? When people are in a good mood and this moody person comes in, but once you're detached from all of that, then you can keep your own like happiness, your spiritual alignment, and you say, okay, well, this person's mood does not affect me because I am in my own space there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, emotions are contagious. We know that. The research shows that.
Mhm,
But connecting to spirit's contagious too. That's what I'm learning now.
mhm,
So,
mhm,
that's a whole nother exciting adventure for me to see people catch the spirit of it
mhm,
and realize, wow, I have something really special here
mhm.
that I can tap into.
How do you deal with the doubt that people have or the resistance that you also talked about? What's kind of a strategy of trying to make them feel at ease? Because when people are not at ease, they're not going to listen to you, right? So how can you kind of get them there so they can accept some of these truths, I would say.
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's when, so cleanse the system I teach, which is an acronym for 7 steps for asking spirit, 7 steps for processing your emotions, 7 steps for connecting to your guides,
Mhm,
7 steps for clearing your energy. So that's why I have the 4 sevens. And I think what I've learned is to trust the system.
mhm,
I've tested it so many times. I've worked with it for so many years that when someone has doubt, I know that once they start processing their emotions, I trust that process
mhm,
that they will come around.
mhm,
And so my job is not to judge or not to get them to think otherwise, but just to listen and be to keep giving them the tools. And I know once that energy of those emotions start moving, it's transformation. I've seen it happen so often. I have had people with resistance, and then they come around. So I
mhm.
don't try to do anything
Yeah.
when there's doubt. What I will say is I will teach them how to process, and then I will encourage them to ask spirit so
Mm.
they don't feel like I'm pushing something on
Yes,
them.
that's it.
You ask. Go
Yeah,
ahead. I'm
yeah,
giving you the tools. Ask and
yeah,
see what you get. And what I've heard from people is it's very empowering that way.
yeah. And I think just to be open, that's our responsibility, each of us, to be open to other things as well. A certain openness is necessary. And so when I first read about manifestation some years ago, I was like, okay, I don't think so. I don't believe in it, but I'll give it a shot. Who knows, right? And it did come true. And I wish I'd asked for more, but it did come true. So I said, well, there is something to it. Let's explore that. And I think it's kind of not healthy if we're closing off certain things or certain beliefs or certain ideas. And I think just kind of that openness and curiosity and saying like, okay, let's give this a try. Let's try it out. Let's ask the spirit and see what happens. No, you have nothing to lose, right? And so it's not even an investment. You're not losing money or anything. It's just
No,
a minor experiment. See how it works for you, right?
absolutely. Yeah. And in the book, I provide space for journaling. I show them where they're going to ask, where they're going to receive, what that looks like. So people are sort of guided through the process there. But yeah, you have nothing to lose in
Mm-hmm.
this.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Sherianna Boyle. I just want to mention again, you're an international best-selling author. You present at lots of workshops. You're the founder of Emotional Detox, which Detox Coaching, which we mentioned. You also have a Just Ask Spirit podcast. Is that
Yeah.
true? Oh yeah,
Yes.
wonderful. Yeah, that's it. And of course, your book, Just Ask Spirit, Free Your Emotions to Energize Intuition and Discover Purpose. Such a pleasure talking to you, Sherianna. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much. Thank you.